The defense argument,
he's using fear.
as I listened, it was almost like Mr. Tacopina took off in a plane with no flight plan, and he flew around in circles. Circle after circle after circle. And eventually, he kind of just ran out of gas and kind of just crashed the plane. There wasn't much direction. There wasn't much focus. And there wasn't an emphasis on the actual facts you're here to decide. Now listen, he's got a tough case. In opening statement, my partner got up here and he told me this is a simple case. It is a simple case. I'm going to tell you.
It's not.
This case could and easily could be a 5-minute verdict. And here's why. Because once you decide that this was not a prop gun, and ladies and gentlemen, it's not a prop gun. I'm going to go through all the reasons. And once you decide
don't do that, please.
This case is done. It's over. Because that's the defense in the case. Not, as Mr. Tacopina tried to argue, well, it's self-defense. You notice, Mr. Tacopina didn't actually reach the next step. He talked about self-defense, but he never explained to you, for it to be self-defense, you have to find that it was a real gun. That's what you have to find. If you have a question about that, you ask the court.
He did say that.
You have to find, to get to self-defense, that it was a real gun. And their defense in this case was, it was a prop gun. That's the issue in this case. Was it a prop gun or was it not? If you find it's a prop gun, all I can say is, you know what? You really need to examine why you're getting there. And I'm going to bring up something that's really important. The defendant is a celebrity. His wife's an even bigger celebrity. Many of you know who they are. They brought in 2 adorable children yesterday for closing argument.
All right, that's the
Now,
second
they
time.
haven't been here at any other time.
You get one more time, John.
And you have to ask yourselves, those kids have a right to be there. Why children that age would be here in a situation like this, don't know. But you have to ask.
What? Nah. Don't do that. Don't do. Why is his family here supporting him? Come on, dude. That's just garbage. Rihanna's presence there alone would be enough. She doesn't need to bring the kids there. She's Rihanna. She could be there all by herself and the whole world's going to be reporting it. They don't care about those kids. Garbage. Absolute
Ask yourself,
trash.
am I going to let my feelings of not wanting to convict the defendant? And Mr. Tacopina made it very clear. You notice
He sounds desperate, man.
He literally brought up Rihanna. He brought up the defendant's family. And he basically was saying, hey, listen, if you convict him, it's going to be very difficult on the family.
He basically said
that is not
that?
something you are allowed to consider. So I'm not telling you I don't think you should consider it. You are not allowed to consider it. If you think you are allowed to consider it, ask the question to the judge. When you go back, you can send out notes. You can ask questions. You are not allowed to consider how this might affect Rihanna or his kids.
The jury's not stupid, man.
We are all in the world responsible for what we do. And I'm going to add something else, too. There was testimony from ASAP Lou. And ASAP Lou, even though it wasn't a question, ASAP Lou wanted to get in front of you, I think 2 times at a minimum.
I'm going to let him finish. But this is a bad theme with both of these prosecutors. They keep skipping over 12's testimony, which was clearly the best testimony throughout this trial. And there's a reason. Because they had a very clear, credible story that lined up with what we were seeing. Relly, on the other hand, not so much. So, I don't know. Maybe he'll get into it more a little bit later. But I find it interesting they go to Lou.
The defendant is looking at whatever Judge Arnold decides he is going to give him. So, you are not allowed, by the way, to consider, oh my gosh, if I convict, you get 24 years. You're not allowed to consider, even if that was true. But in the end, Judge Arnold will decide what the sentence in this case is. So if any of you go back there and say, well, you know what, I just don't think that this crime, I'm just not comfortable with 24 years, you can't do that. If one of the rest of you does it, guys, it's misconduct. You can't do it. You got to stop yourself. You got to stop the person next to you.
He wants him to snitch like Miss Love said. Or Miss Hilton said. Somebody tries to do that, tell on him.
All right. You've got to base your decision on this case on the facts that have been proved from the evidence. Now, this is really important. The instruction does not say on the facts that have been proved from the people's evidence. That is hugely important in this case. There is no question whatsoever that our case got immeasurably stronger because the defense chose to put on a case. No question. Even if some of you were saying to yourselves, you know what, I don't think based on just what the prosecution put on that I would have convicted. And let's think about that for a second. Until the defense case, now they mentioned in opening, but remember, opening is not evidence. Until the defense case, we don't know what the defense is. It could have been self-defense. It could have been any number of things. It wasn't. They chose to put on a defense. They didn't have to. You remember what here I asked you all. Are you going to give any points to the defense if they choose to put on a defense in their case when they don't have to? Or are you going to look at their evidence as critically, as importantly, as you do for our evidence? You all said you would do it. They elected to put on a defense that killed their case. It destroyed it. And I'll go through it. It started with Wally. The best evidence from the victim. This is probably the second thing I agree with Mr. Tacopina. Mr. Tacopina put on Wally to impeach the defendant, to impeach the victim on an issue of whether it was his voice. And obviously, it was Relly's voice. And obviously, he was uncooperative. But let's take a step back and ask ourselves, why was Relly uncooperative in this case?
Obviously, our key witness lied on the stand. He's doing whatever he can to make sure his civil lawsuit goes through. I mean, don't worry about that. Let's talk about Wally.
What?
Okay.
Relly told you, and you saw evidence of it. In April of 2022,
this
when it
guy
came out that Relly was the individual who reported the defendant to the police, he's facing death threats. His family is facing death threats.
Oh, poor guy.
So he is up there not wanting to answer any question about his family. He doesn't even want to give his girlfriend's name. He doesn't want to say where he lives. He doesn't want to identify anything about
we know who his
family.
girlfriend is.
You got to ask yourselves, first of all, is it understandable why he didn't want to answer the question? Of course it is. You have to ask yourselves, Mr. Tacopina repeatedly asked those questions. Listen, that's his right as a lawyer. He can certainly do that. But it was very clear that the result of that, if not the intention, was to get Relly upset, to get him agitated, and to shut him down. And that's what happened. But even more importantly, none of those questions, none of those answers matter. And what's amazing is the defense, their witness, they put on the evidence from Wally, which is some of the most crucial evidence in the case. And again, I'm going to get there. So the defense had no obligation to put on a case. They could have done nothing. But do not be mistaken. Some jurors go back and they say, you know what? Well, because if I only look at the people's case, they haven't proven it beyond a reasonable doubt. That's why this says, prove from the evidence, not prove from the people's evidence, all of the evidence in the case.
Okay, well, we're still not with you, man.
We've got a duty, and we don't hide behind it at all. We have a duty to prove the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And by the way, it's interesting. Mr. Tacopina keeps talking about, quote, reasonable doubts. There's no such thing as reasonable doubts. They are not individual pieces. Reasonable doubt is an overall view from all of the evidence. So when he said, well, listen, if you have a reasonable doubt about Relly's credibility, then that means it's a not guilty. That's not true at all. The question is, when you look at all of the evidence, if you find that Relly's credibility is really material, if you find that there isn't other evidence that overcomes it, does the overall collection of the evidence cause you to have a reasonable doubt? There is no such thing as reasonable doubts. They are not like pieces of a cookie where you pick up one and go, here's a reasonable doubt. It's not how it works. And you got the instruction that shows it. We have to prove every element of the crime's charged. No question. That's our burden.
Okay.
This is really important. Not every element in every case is in dispute or reasonably in dispute. So what does that mean? So for instance, we would have had to prove that it was the defendant who was at the scene. That's our burden. But the defense has already conceded that. We would have had to prove that the defendant had a gun. They've already conceded he had a gun. They say it's prop gun. We would have had to concede, we would have had to prove, that the defendant assaulted Relly with the gun. Well, they've conceded that. They just say it was a prop gun. We don't have to prove whatsoever that the defendant shot Relly, although that's what the evidence demonstrates. So very little in this case is in dispute, and that is hugely important. So let's talk about the relevant evidence in this case. So the day before the shooting, November 5th, 2021, Relly's in a car with Jabari. I got to talk about Bari for a second, ASAP Bari. The defense is saying, well, why didn't you bring Bari in to us? Bari is the guy, if you remember, who posted, who is calling Relly a rat or a snitch. I can't remember which it is right now. The people's position is that Bari is not credible. If the defense wanted to bring him in, if they thought that he had evidence to add to their case, they would have brought him in. They flew in a guy from France, okay? Let's just take a step back. They flew in an individual from France at tremendous expense on almost no notice. And they flew him in because they wanted to prove that that was Relly's voice on the tapes. Now, one has to ask themselves, did they listen to the tapes? Because the tapes are some of the best evidence we have in this case. And you know that they only played for you a little snippet.
No, here we go.
The whole first part of that call. Uninterrupted. I'm not going to give a snippet. So
Uninterrupted,
what
let's
happened?
see.
Before the shooting, there's an issue between the two of them. Okay? The defendant is upset with Relly. That's not a dispute. He's upset with him. I have no idea whether Relly was right about this dispute or the defendant was right about the dispute. But here's what I know for sure. It does not matter. It's not an issue for you to even consider. Let's assume that Relly paid for every part of ASAP Josh's funeral. Okay? The most expensive funeral in the history of mankind. He paid $20 million for the funeral. Let's assume that happened. It doesn't change the fact that he can't assault him with a firearm. I don't know. We have no idea who is right on this. But it's very clear it doesn't matter. But what's important is there is a dispute. And by the way, if that call did not take place, do you believe for a second that they would not have brought ASAP Bari in? And what do you think would have been the response for the defense if we would have brought ASAP Bari in, and ASAP Bari would have lied the same way that Welby lied, and Wally lied, and ASAP Lou lied? So,
What?
he's his close friend. If that guy was going to help him...
No. He can't do this. Oh, this point is crazy. This point is crazy, man. So he's saying... He's using the fact that his key witness said something on phone calls that his key witness lied about to prove that the other witnesses lied.
What?
Is that how?
They would have called him. And they have the power of the subpoena just like we do. And in fact, he's the defendant's friend. They know where he is. They're able to access him. So the fact that he's not here, do not get caught up in that game.
Let's talk about 12's testimony.
Again, the relevance of this is simply that they had a dispute the day before. And the defendant, who is clearly a proud individual, got embarrassed by the fact that Relly is hearing him talking about him behind his back. Which, let's face it, it's not very manly, okay? It's just not. And it's
Talking
clear
about being manly.
that the defendant is embarrassed by this. He's embarrassed by the fact that Relly knows he is talking about him behind his back. And Relly doesn't like it, clearly. So, this is the day before the shooting. You can see what's going on. I'm not going to repeat the language. This is what we have. By the way, at this point in time, this is a stupid little incident, okay? The man's a multi-millionaire. Why on earth is he going to take it to the level that he took it? I don't know, but that's exactly what he did.
This is crazy.
So what happens? Well, the day of the shooting, we know that Relly is receiving a bunch of calls from the defendant, from Ills, and from 12. And if you don't think that Ills and 12 know what's going on, I got a bridge to sell you. Okay? If you think, as the defense argued, that those were credible witnesses, Relly was angry and he was hostile. They weren't angry or hostile. They were just liars.
What?
Start to finish. So what happens? Well, we know shortly before the shooting, let's get to it, stop ducking my calls. Now, by the way, Relly says, hey, listen, I'm not really sure what's going to happen. And when you look at it, it looks like they're going to have a disagreement. But this is really important. Relly can kick the defendant's ass all day, okay? That's clear. But if Relly does that, he loses his life. He doesn't have any interest in doing that. He knows it, the defendant knows it, everybody knows it. Even those lying witnesses, 12 and Lou, eventually had to concede that the defendant has a lot of power in the industry.
Why does he keep talking about lying witnesses? Every time. Hey, man, if I'm on this jury and I think about him saying lying witness, the first person that comes to my mind is the first witness, which was Relly. He keeps saying lying witness, lying witness. This is a bad move. A bad move because they're admitting several times. Relly said that wasn't him on the phone call. Let's be real. It was him. How are you calling these other witnesses liars and you just stood there and admitted and are going to use evidence that proves your witness was lying? Okay, I'm gonna let it play, y'all. I'm sorry.
Industry where Relly works, the industry that he is dependent upon for his livelihood.
I'm gonna let it play.
So he's got not only no motivation for getting into a fight with the defendant, he can't do it.
Where are the
He's
text
gotta
messages
sit back
before
and
that?
take
He
whatever he's
deleted
gonna
them.
take. Because he's power. That's who he is. He's got power. There's Rocky and there's Relly. Rocky knows it and Relly knows it. That's just the facts of life. So what happens? We have this incident. Now, thank God we have video in this case. Okay? Because without video, we all be in trouble. This video is very clear. And when Relly is walking, there's a couple things we want to consider. I'm going to get to this again. The idea that the defendant is bringing a gun to this meeting makes no sense at all. He's got two guys with him. He's not afraid of Relly. Relly's not looking for a fight. And you're going to see that the first action is the defendant grabbing Relly. That's what you're going to see. As they're walking,
that's not true.
This is slowed down so you can see. So what you saw, the defendant grabs his arm. Now the defendant is pushing him forward. Relly is holding him back. Now this is really important.
That's not what happened.
Stop it for a minute, please. Come on, stop it.
That's not what happened. Really, why is he showing this? He has it.
So what you saw, the defendant grabs his arm.
Rocky has his hands down. You can clearly see his hands are down.
You see.
Why do they keep saying this? Look.
So what you saw, the defendant grabs his arm. Now the defendant is pushing him forward. Relly is
How did he grab his arm if Relly's arm was extended?
Holding him back. Now this is really important.
Oh man.
Stop it for a minute, please. Do you mind stopping it for a minute? So this is really important. Some stuff in the trial is almost funny. I would ask 12, so what was the weather like that night? Man, it's cold. And Relly, he's huge. He's got muscles all over his body. They made Relly out to be the Hulk. They made that happen because that's the narrative they wanted to create. But the problem is if you watch, Relly clearly is stronger than Rocky is. He's stronger than Ills is. Yet he's letting Rocky push him back. If he had wanted to, he had his hand available to punch Rocky. He didn't do it. Probably not because he didn't want to. Because he's a grown man who understands that if he does that, it's over. He's got no career. He's done. What he doesn't understand is that in the next moment, Rocky's going to take out a gun, and Relly is going to realize, oh my God, it's over anyway. Please play it. So I'm going to stop it. Stop. I don't know if you remember, but when I had 12 on cross-examination, and he is saying that he's trying to pull the Relly off of Rocky. And I think this same image, and I'm asking him, well, wait a minute. How are you trying to pull Relly off of Rocky when you're in the middle? You're trying to keep Rocky off of Relly. No, I'm not in the middle. Of course he's in the middle. Keep playing it. And now watch the gun. Stop. It is true, we do not see the gun come out. But we know from before that the gun was not in Rocky's hand because we saw his hand before. Now, if you remember, what was 12's version of how the gun came out? I mean, guys, I'm not making this up. He said that Relly lifts Rocky off the ground. His pants fall down, and Relly reaches back to pull his pants up and happens to end up with the gun and what looks like his finger on the trigger. That is more absurd than, again, the tornado example with Bill. It's absurd. It insults your intelligence. And the only value that it has is if you are going to try to find a way to let this man get away with what he's done. And this goes back to what your duty is. You're here to call balls and strikes. What happens to Rocky is not your responsibility. Not whatsoever. Your responsibility is determining what happened. It's almost like what an umpire does, okay? When an umpire calls a strike or calls a ball, he doesn't own what happens in the game. The players decide the game. He's just making the calls according to the rules. Do not be fooled into the idea that, quote, Rocky's life is in your hands. Rocky's life is not in your hands. The determination of what Rocky did is. And what happens from there, that's on him, and that's up to the judge. So what happens? So he's got the gun out. Continue to play, please. Stop. So if he was trying to put the gun back, why is the gun now from behind him to in front of him? So they're going to say, well, you don't see what he does with the gun. Well, if his gun fell out accidentally, why doesn't he put it back? Well, it's because it didn't fall out accidentally. He pulled it out, and now he's going to assault Relly with it. And the fact that you don't see the assault because of the cameras, ask yourselves, logically, he took the gun out. He switched hands. The gun is now in front of him. What's he doing with the gun? He's doing exactly what Relly said he was doing with it. And by the way, nobody said that the defendant tried to murder Relly, intended to murder Relly. You're not charged with that. So the gun comes out. Continue to play. Stop. Okay, now, if you notice, he's about to put the gun back. And you're going to see the people crossing because, keep playing. So the gun went back because you see the people that are on top? They're walking from the direction where Rocky just was. Now, why Rocky put that gun away, we're never going to know. I can't prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt why he put the gun away. No one can. I can tell you that the evidence suggests, clearly, it's undisputed, there's a couple of people walking right by. It's in the middle of Hollywood, and Rocky's a pretty famous person, and if he was planning on shooting the gun at that point in time, that would really seem to be an ill-advised place to do it. You have to ask yourself, do you think it's a coincidence that when Rocky ends up actually shooting the gun, that the gun is shot in a place where Rocky reasonably doesn't believe anybody's watching him? He doesn't know about the cameras. He knows there's a crowd of people here. Continue to play, please. So this is how the first incident ends. Okay? This is how it ends. So, when we're looking at this, that's count one. That's the assault with a firearm. That's the personal use of the firearm. We don't have to prove any more than what you've just seen. Now, we do have to prove that it's a real gun. And here's what's interesting. Why are we unable to determine definitively? We certainly have strong evidence that it's a real gun based on what happens in that scene. But who was in control of that gun? And let's think about what the argument is. They're saying that's a prop gun. Where's the prop gun? How are we supposed to prove that it's not a prop gun when they've got the gun and they got rid of it? It's impossible. There's no way for us to do anything more than what we've done. So what happens at the next scene? Part two of this. Now this is going to be important because what you're going to see here is you're going to see that the incident starts before Relly ever grabs Ills. By the way, Ills is the guy he likes. He doesn't like 12. So you want to just ask yourself for a second. He never tells anybody, hey, Ills had a gun, Ills had a knife.
Ills is the guy he likes.
Ills. He's not assaulting Ills. He's not punching him. He's not doing anything to Ills. He's using Ills as a shield, just like he's going to say. But let's look up to the top of the first thing happens.
Hills is the guy he likes.
Okay. So here we go.
This is
Back up
crazy.
again. Start going over. So when you're watching this, what you're going to see is not as the defense described, that Relly grabs Gills and then Rocky defends him. What you're going to see is Rocky is going to reach behind and then he's going to advance towards Relly. That is clearly when Relly sees a firearm, and that's when he ends up grabbing Gills. So the idea that, well, the gunshot doesn't happen until after he grabs Gills, it doesn't matter. Relly's responding to the fact that Rocky's pulled a gun on him for the second time. And by the way, this is a lot scarier than the first time, because now they're by themselves, and clearly Relly is concerned he's about to get shot. Now, I'm going to get to it, I'm going to address it, but this doesn't even begin to cover the idea that their defense is not just this was a prop gun, which is absurd. It's an absurd defense. Their defense is it's a prop gun, and Relly knew it was a prop gun. And even though Relly knew it was a prop gun, Rocky pulled it on him to scare him, even though by their own admission, he knows it's fake. And you can see Relly running around, and you can see what 12 does, and you can see what Rocky does, and no one is acting like it's a prop gun because it isn't. So let's watch it. Boom, guns out.
Why aren't they zooming in?
By the way, at one point in time, one of the witnesses, I think it was 12, said that the defendant fired a warning shot. You don't fire a warning shot with a prop gun, it doesn't fire anything. Also, you can see that on that
That's
shot,
a dumb argument.
the defendant has the gun out, facing forward, appearing to target Relly. And by the way, he moves into a better position in between the shots. And the only reasonable conclusion you can reach from that is that he is trying to get a line of fire onto Relly. Relly didn't suffer the minor
can't
injury
prove that.
because the defendant didn't try to shoot him. He suffered the minor injury because he used Ills as a shield, and for whatever reason, the defendant didn't hit him. At least didn't hit him other than in his hand. But the idea that you need to look at the gunshot and the fact that Relly is already grabbing Ills as a shield, that's just misleading. It just doesn't work. I'm going to play this now in half speed. Now let's see what you say. And the idea, by the way, that Ills, that 12 is running away because Relly is trying to attack him is absurd. If you knew nothing, all you saw was this video and somebody told you, hey, listen, that's a fake gun, and everybody knows it's a fake gun. You would go, well, wait a minute. If it's a fake gun, why is everybody running around? Why is Relly grabbing Ills as a shield? Why is 12 running away? By the way, how does this incident
Not
end?
what it looks like to me.
This incident ends not because the defendant voluntarily says it's over. 12 literally is blocking him and pushing him away. The defendant's fired up. He's angry. We don't know what was going to happen next, but it's not as if the defendant decided on his own, you know what, I'm done. 12 pushes him away. So this is the close-up. And again, this is a little bit harder. This needs to be played at half speed. I got it. This needs to be played at half speed. Again, we already know that we've got... By the way, the only thing that Mr. Tacopine did not accuse Relly of was planting the nail on the seat. And I was waiting for it. I was waiting for him to say, Relly planted the nail. He was trying to get me. So, we know what we have. Defendant, 12 and we've got, which is hard to see, we've got Relly and Ills.
It's hard to see.
So what happens? You watch for yourself. You're going to see Relly reach and then move. When Relly reaches and moves, when the defendant reaches and moves, that's when the gun is out. Whoops. Sorry.
Get it together, y'all.
So here we go. Boom. You see him reach, guns out. 12 moves. Relly is running, trying to get behind Ills. He's not beating Ills. And what is Rocky doing? He's running around, trying to get a shot, and he's going to fire. And when he fires a second time, the gun is outstretched, aiming at Relly.
It's not.
And now look, there's 12 grabbing him and making the defendant go away. That's how this thing ends. Again, and I understand it.
So why does Relly go back? This whole thing doesn't make sense. And did Rocky shoot the gun with his right hand? Because when the gun allegedly fell out, he had it in his left hand. If he's right-handed, why would he have the gun in his left hand? To me, it would make more sense that he, as it was falling out, he grabbed it with his left hand.
You guys don't want to believe that this man who has everything, is going to give it all up for this. I get it. But that's a decision he made. I didn't make it for him. You didn't make it for him. The judge didn't. Mr. Tacopina didn't. He made that decision on November 6th. And what's crazy is that apparently Relly would have been more than willing to take the money and not cooperate with anybody. And by the way, why is that? Do you think that if you are in the hip-hop rap community, that going to the police and filing a case against A$AP Rocky is going to help your career? It's done. When Rocky was saying, and you heard it before, hey, I'd be on the beach, he would have been on the beach. So not only did the defendant commit this violent crime, but in the end, his attitude was, no, I'm not doing anything. Now, that's arrogant, but it's what happened. And I want to make sure that no matter how successful he is, how famous his wife is, how cute his kids are, how much they giggle here during closing arguments, that you guys are not going to say, you know what?
Yikes.
We're going to give him a little extra.
Leave the kids out of it, man.
Like you would treat any other person. Because in the end, that's all that he is entitled to. He doesn't get to be the big celebrity in a jury trial. He's a defendant like anyone else.